Howie Roseman actually did it. The Philadelphia Eagles selected Quinyon Mitchell, the cornerback from Toledo, with a 22nd overall pick.
You are Locked On Eagles, your daily Philadelphia Eagles podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, Eagles fans? I'm Louis DiBiase, co-host of the Locked On Eagles podcast, Eagles analyst also over at Bleacher Report. Same with my co-host, Gino Camilleri, our scouting director extraordinaire. On today's edition of Locked On Eagles, we recap the Birds' first pick in the 2024 NFL Draft. They didn't even have to trade up. They got cornerback Quinyon Mitchell from Toledo. What are they going to do with that 50th pick and 53 on day two? We'll get into that. Plus the A.J. Brown contract extension, a jam-packed day one of the 2024 NFL Draft. Thanks so much for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Monopoly Go. I admit it, I have a competitive side, and it's a big fan of Monopoly Go, the mobile hit twist on the classic Monopoly game. So join your friends and download Monopoly Go, now free on the App Store or Google Play. We just did a 5-hour live show, Gino, so we're coming off a pretty high that had a lot of ups and downs in this NFL draft, unpredictability, offense galore, but the board could not have fallen better for the Philadelphia Eagles, who did not need to move up to the 12th overall pick like we did in Mock Draft Monday. They didn't have to move up to Seattle's pick at 16. They got their pick of whichever corner they wanted at 22nd overall, keeping both of those second-round picks, keeping any future assets, and they said no to Terrion Arnold. We want the ultimate Lou DiBiase, Gino Camilleri, Locked On Eagles, my guy, Quinyon Mitchell. This is, for me, what it was for you when the Eagles took Devontae Smith. Like, this was one of my favorite players in a draft in a very long time. I can't believe they actually took a corner for the first time on day one in Howie's career. I'm just elated.
Trying to process the fact that the Eagles finally took a cornerback for the first time in 20 years.
I was 5 years old the last time they did it.
It'll make you step back and say, wow, like, yeah, I'm still kind of processing it. Like, they actually did what we thought they should do and what we were going through in every best case scenario. Like, can they get one of these top two cornerbacks? And like you said, they didn't have to trade the 50th. The 53rd, the 122nd. They traded no picks, no future picks.
And both were available.
And they got arguably the top defensive player on their board, arguably the best consensus cornerback in the class, somebody who you look at right now comes into a situation like Howie Roseman said, where he can sit behind a Hall of Fame type of player in Darius Slay, in James Bradbury. You look at that cornerback room now, Lou, on top of the reinstatement of Isaiah Rodgers and adding Quinyon Mitchell and bringing back Avante and still having all of these guys there. This secondary went from downright piss poor last year to a unit that is going to be ferocious next year, man. Like, you have dogs. You got Slay. You got Quinyon. You bring back CGJ. You already have Sidney Brown, who is a heat-seeking missile on the back end, and Reed Blankenship. This offseason has gone swimmingly. Like, how are we here? How is this the play?
How are they paying running backs and drafting corners? Like, if Howie Roseman can change, anybody can change. Because he has never paid a running back like Saquon Barkley. He has never taken a corner in the first round. He's only taken one second-rounder, and that was almost 7 years ago now, Sidney Jones back in 2017. But that's what I love about Howie Roseman. His philosophy is always ever changing as the league changes. And this isn't, though, like taking a linebacker on day one or taking a running back or taking a safety. Howie has prioritized corner. He values it. But he has always taken different routes, trading for a Darius Slay, giving a big contract to Nnamdi Asomugha, trading a 2 for DRC or a 3 for Ronald Darby, going with a day 2 pick back-to-back like Sidney Jones and Rasul Douglas. So he definitely prioritizes corner more than like a linebacker or safety or running back. But he has never taken this route, and it's always frustrated me because these other alternative routes, it's been good for 2 to 3 years, but there's just always this constant turnover at a very important position. Look at the NFL now. Look at the Eagles paying A.J. Brown today. Look at the Bears taking Roma Dunze when they already had Keenan Allen and DJ Moore, or San Francisco with Ayuk and Debo and Kittle. You need corners in an era where there are so many weapons on every offense. And to get a guy that has 4.3 speed, ball skills like Quinyon Mitchell, it was a necessity. But it was also the BPA, in my opinion. Like, the fact that he was available at 22 is not a steal like Jalen Carter last year, but it feels in a similar realm.
Let's take a step back real quick to a couple years ago when Howie Roseman wrote down on a piece of paper 3 things when it came to drafting Eagles prospects. Can they run? Do they love football? And are they healthy?
Yes, and yes for Quinyon.
Sean Syed, who's one of the great follows on Twitter, just tweeted out a video where he asked Quinyon Mitchell, you're going to Vic Fangio's scheme. You're going to be asked to do a lot of different things, picking up routes in different fashions. Are you okay with that? And Quinyon replied, whatever they ask me to do, I'm going to go and do it. That's the type of player you want. And Lou, he didn't just talk the talk. He walked the walk. He's a true zone corner playing at Toledo. Goes down to the Senior Bowl, which is the most precarious position for a defensive back, where they put you in all of these man-on-man situations because they want to see, that being NFL scouts, if you can hang. And boy, did he not just hang, Lou. He showed out. This guy was arguably the best cornerback there, arguably one of the better cornerbacks in all of college football. Strip away what the logo on the helmet is. Turn on the tape. Turn on the game where he gets 4 interceptions. When's the last time the Eagles had a guy like that? Asante Samuel? Like a true go-get-it, around the ball, is going to pick it off in a huge moment for you when you need. That's Quinyon Mitchell, dude.
Well, that's the thing is, I love that you mentioned the Senior Bowl, because when I was down there, Mitchell talked about the need to show the league that he can play press man. And there is nothing about his abilities that would have made you question that. A 4.3 speed corner that has some of the best ball skills. I think the best ball skills in this class. As you mentioned, a 4-pick game. He had a game where he had 2 pick sixes as well. Just the click and close, the smooth, like, opening release of his hips. Like, his vision is great. There was nothing that said he couldn't play press man, but Toledo was dominantly a zone coverage defense. So he wanted to show at the Senior Bowl against the best of the best receivers and one-on-ones that he can strap one-on-one, press of the line, and he did that and was one of the best players, regardless of position, that entire week. And that's amazing. But I love that you mentioned the playmaking, because that's the number one thing I take away from the Mitchell pick. Look at what happened in 2022 when you made the Super Bowl. You had a Chauncey Gardner-Johnson who was atop the league in interceptions. You had a James Bradbury who was getting picks all year. Same with Darius Slay. That was something that went out the door this past year. You didn't have the playmaking on defense. And bringing back Chauncey, bringing in Quinyon Mitchell, that's going to give you that 2022 style back, where you're going to get the ball back to Jalen Hurts in good field advantage situations. Like, that's such a huge part of this equation outside of just the press and zone and the versatility in that way. Like, the playmaking is so crucial.
I'm so glad you mentioned that point, that you are going to now set up your loaded offense with more possessions. That's exactly what this team lacked last year.
Yeah.
We mentioned it on the live show, Lou. The San Fran game was the first cut. The Arizona game was the death of that team. And what was the death of that team? Not being able to stop the pass in a pass-happy league.
In all those games, man, it was the Niners
every game. Every game. You go to
they
the
were always
playoffs and
winning
you
in
can't stop
spite of
anybody.
the secondary. Yeah, and it's not a coincidence you made the Super Bowl the year before when you had all-pro secondary play. It's not a coincidence.
Talk about Howie wanting to right the wrongs, like not bringing back Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, not having an heir apparent there behind James Bradbury. Well, what do you have right now, Lou? You bring back Chauncey. You invested in Sidney Brown last year. You had Reed Blankenship, who is a gem for you back there. You have a loaded cornerback room. I can't wait for the competition in the preseason, Lou. That's going to be some legitimate tape that those guys are putting out, like the Eli Rickses and the Josh Jobs. Those guys are going to have to step up now, man. There's a new
I don't even know if they can,
room.
Man. I think Mitchell's going to be one of your boundary starters.
Scenario, though. But like you want those guys to compete because you want the Kiwis to push to the next level, right? You want Zach to come back from injury and be that next step.
I agree. And it's going to be Mitchell and Slay, though. And it's very Cam Jurgens, Jason Kelsey-esque, where
But is that a bad thing to bring more good players into that room? No way.
I love the idea of Quinyon Mitchell learning by playing next to the player he emulates his game after the most, very similar to Cam Jurgens and Jason Kelce last year. Howie Roseman said in his press conference a few weeks ago that that's something that's important to him, to have these guys learn from legends, especially if they can on the field. And we're like, oh no, that means tackle with Lane Johnson, could be a Tyler Guyton type from Oklahoma. It applies to corner here as well. And having Quinyon, as you mentioned, Darius Slay, Isaiah Rodgers, Keely Ringo, Eli Ricks, Avonte Maddox, you can draft another corner on day 2 or day 3. Suddenly this position looks a whole lot better. And I just can't believe how he actually did it. But this didn't just make sense from a need perspective, Gino. Again, I think this was also the BPA. The board went crazy offense. There was not a defensive player inside the top 10. When was the first pick? It was Laiatu Latu, right? Laiatu Latu at 15. I mean, and there was only 2 more guys after that, Byron Murphy and then Dallas Turner. And then, Jared Verse as well. Like, this was the perfect year to need defense, and that's what the Eagles needed.
Take a step back to the Jeffrey Simmons class when that defensive line was so good, and the Cleveland Farrell and like the Andre Dillards of the world, where you're saying best case scenario, a lot of offense goes and you can land at Jeffrey Simmons. That didn't happen. It was worst case scenario, kind of probably maybe a little bit of panic at that Andre Dillard selection at the time. Now, Lou, the same exact thing happened, but your need lined up with BPA.
It was just
which
perfect storm.
Also lined up with the NFL,
right,
being those other teams reacting to not having offensive tackles, reacting to not having Michael Penix going at 8 was the most surreal thing that I've ever heard.
I couldn't believe it. I really couldn't believe it.
Was that not the best case scenario? Like,
it was.
Went through
Bo Nix going at 12.
That was not going to happen, and it did.
Bo Nix going at 12 blew my mind. Huge. The fact that Penix and Nix were both top 12 picks was just surreal.
It worked out perfectly.
Look, I would have loved Terry and Arnold. I think he's probably a better tackle than Mitchell, a little more physical, but Mitchell is the faster corner with better ball skills. I just think he fits more what I'm looking for in a corner at this level. And the other cool thing, Gino, is Howie Roseman. I think he's become a better drafter because he simplified things and he started taking the best players from the best schools like Bama and Georgia. But you can't always scout the helmet, as you always say. And I like that he went back to kind of his roots of going with a smaller school player in Mitchell, because you can't scout the helmet. This is a player that translates very well to the next level. And I was a little bit nervous that Howie suddenly was going to be stubborn and say, I'm only taking SEC players or Big Ten players. But no, he, again, just the most open-minded general manager in football.
Zig when everybody else zags, Lou. The league went offense. Nearly
he went defense.
17 of the picks before him were offense, essentially. And what happened? You got the best cornerback because you were able to wait there. You were able to wait and sit while everybody else got their offensive linemen. Probably some of the chatter about offensive linemen was Howie sending out smoke screens. Yep. And guess what happened? He got his guy, Quinyon Mitchell.
Quinyon Mitchell.
It's surreal to say.
Eagle.
He's an Eagle,
I can't.
Baby.
This is the first time ever on the podcast, or just maybe ever, that I've gotten my guy. Like, there's been some my guys have taken, like Quez Watkins, Moro Jomo, like later picks, but never like the number one player for me. So this was a really special night. We had over 500 people watching our live show. If any of you are watching or listening right now, shout out to you guys. You made the night so incredible. We've got 2 more segments, though, to recap day 1 right here on Locked On Eagles. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back to talk about Quinyon Mitchell, the new Philadelphia Eagles cornerback. Today's episode of Locked On Eagles is brought to you by Monopoly Go. We've all been there, either as a player or a fan. It's halftime and the scoreboard's not looking good. You're feeling low, not sure you or your team can pull out a win. That's when you got to dig deep, lift your head up high, and say to yourself, time to get back in the game and pull off some bank heists and take as much of my friends' money as I possibly can. That's right, the smash hit mobile game Monopoly Go. They let you compete with your friends to get the most riches and the biggest empire. It's the Monopoly you love, but on your phone anytime, with tons of new twists, including leaderboards to compare your progress to your buddies. There's so much to do. Play on countless dynamic Monopoly boards. Make your friends bankrupt by smashing their landmarks with a wrecking ball. Charge other players rent for your iconic properties. You can even work with your friends to crack open community chests and in tournaments get rewards that are extra and climb the leaderboard. So get back out there, put on your game face, and download Monopoly Go, now free on the App Store or on Google Play.
We're also proud to say that this episode is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. I'm kicking myself, Lou. I said to you before the show, Xavier Worthy at plus 290 to go either to Kansas City or Buffalo.
You should have hammered it, man. You nailed it.
I didn't hammer it. I hit it right on the head. But the good thing is there's still some fun draft props that you could follow along for day 2. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed, win or lose. Hey, tonight, if you bet on the Sixers, they finally pulled one out. Joel Embiid dropped a 50-burger on the Knicks. Bet on everything from slap shots to home runs to slam dunks, all on the app that's safe, secure, and easy to use. What are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet an automatic win. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, the official sportsbook, the Locked On Podcast Network.
We thank you so much for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. Guys, you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Got to turn on the volume with all that shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all that screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Quinyon Mitchell is a Philadelphia Eagle. The board fell perfectly. They didn't have to trade any draft picks. They got the best corner, which was the biggest need, I think, both short-term and long-term, a position of value that you need in the NFL right now, a fast ball hawk that can play zone and man. Just a perfect night, Gino. And I was a little nervous for a bit because of the run on receivers and quarterbacks. There were still some offensive tackles I thought the Eagles could like, but it was almost like they were going to dangle like the Howie's biggest vices in front of them. You know, edge rushers and defensive tackles. Like Byron Murphy was falling down the board. Dallas Turner, Jared Verse. I was very nervous that the opportunity was going to present itself for him to go with those positions. But the run went right in front of him. And I don't think it forced him to go corner. I think Mitchell probably would have been the pick no matter what. But it just could not have been a more perfect way for this draft to go for what the Eagles wanted at 22.
So the real moment we started to get a little bit nervous is when we got towards like Indianapolis territory, where we were believing that these teams could start to make a run on cornerback. But then all of a sudden, after 14 picks on offense, Indy shocks us and goes Leatu Latu. I was talking that I can't believe Seattle would go Byron Murphy when they get Leonard Williams, and then they bring in Draymond Jones and they pick Byron Murphy. Then Minnesota trades up and they send a whole package, and we're saying there's no way they're sending this much for anything other than a defensive end. Guess who it is? Dallas Turner. Cincinnati, we were shaking in our boots a little bit. They shock us with Amarius Mims. Then LA, Jared Verse.
It just kept falling our way.
Troy Fatanu to Pittsburgh. The last moment where we both had that breath of fresh air
was Fatanu, I think, for me.
Chop Robinson for me.
Well,
when he went to Miami, when it was maybe the best edge left on the board versus the best corner, what would Howie do?
It's a fastball, too, that he likes.
Easy decision.
I think the Fatanu pick for me was when I took a breath of fresh air because I just didn't think anybody else from a value perspective made more sense than a corner, position of need. Fatanu just felt like a Philadelphia Eagle. We were saying that all offseason. The guard tackle versatility, the athleticism. Sounded like Jeff Stoutland really liked him during the combine and the pro day process. Once he went to Pittsburgh, I'm like, it's got to be Mitchell or Arnold at this point. I was very curious who it was going to be, though, between Mitchell and Arnold, because we heard Nick's reports, and of course there's the Bama, Georgia angle, too. I'm so glad. I would have been really happy, Gino, with Arnold, but Mitchell was the preference. I mean, this is a guy that I just think is such a complete prospect.
I think you hit it right on the head. Like, this is your version of Devontae Smith in the best way.
Right, if like you got Jalen Waddle that year, you would have been happy, but not elated like when they got Devontae.
But for good reason, to where like how he even said it. He even said it just happened to align with need and the best player available. I don't think he's BSing us with that. Like, I legitimately think they drafted for need because
Daniel Jeremiah's best player available board, when the Eagles were on the clock, it was Mitchell 1 and Arnold 1, Mitchell 2.
And it aligned with exactly what they needed. They didn't force it by trading potentially 50 or 53 and then some, like we had done in multiple exercises. And they didn't even have to trade, let's say, a 4th-round pick to go up a spot like they did for Jalen Carter last year. Folks, They didn't have to move it all in the best way since the last time they picked at their actual pick. It was Jalen Reagor back then. We were kind of saying, what the hell is going on? And then all of a sudden, they make a great selection, and it's Quinyon Mitchell, man. It's a home run pick.
So, Gino, you mentioned earlier the Howie football points, the 3 things he's looking for after 2019. Well, some of these Quinyon Mitchell stats back up those traits. So can he run? Well, he once clocked in a 23.58 miles per hour
pretty fast
practice run. He also clocked a 4.33 40-yard dash. Can he stay healthy? He started 40 straight games at Toledo. Does he love football? I think so. So much so that he's committed to not committing any penalties. He didn't commit a single penalty in 2023. Do you know how hard that is for a cornerback? And he committed...
That might be the craziest stat I've ever heard.
1 flag in 2022. In 2 years, the man got penalized 1 time at the probably hardest position to not get flags thrown at you. By the way, he can also squat 555 pounds. So he's not this tiny corner that can't be physical. Is he Terrion Arnold, like a 90 graded run stopping corner? No. But he's not Nate Wiggins either.
So I figured out how they draft guys now, or like acquire them. They just bring them to the weight room. You start squatting with Jalen Hurts.
I think that's the
whoever hangs the longest, like you're gonna kick it with us. And it happened to be Quinyon Mitchell.
And this is a freak athlete, man, with crazy upside.
Dude,
like, it's just such a Howie pick.
How crazy hard it is to not come up with a huge holding call in the biggest stage of the entire sport, being the Super Bowl with James Bradbury, and to not commit half of a penalty average over a course of 2 years, Lou. That's crazy. That might be the best statistic, but he's around the football, 4 interceptions in a single game, started 40 consecutive games at a position where, when we were talking about Nate Wiggins, these guys that are like these true fastball, like Ferraris, those soft tissue injuries,
they're in the shop a lot. Yeah, Wiggins got banged up at the combine, actually. And I love Nate Wiggins, so I'm not going to bash him now.
He's got the all-season tires out.
Yeah.
He's got the fresh wax on the hood. He's ready to go, man. Like, this kid is going to come out there, probably be the number 2 right away. Learn behind a guy who he said verbatim he wanted to learn and meet.
And then let Ringo
Darius
and Rodgers
Slay.
battle it out for the long-term other
like
boundary
is
spot.
Ringo like battling for like the 3rd cornerback for the next 4 years?
I'd cut Bradbury at this point too, Gino. I don't want a slow old backup that doesn't play special teams.
He retired a couple years ago. We don't need him anymore.
Quinyon Mitchell was PFF's number 1 graded corner over the last 2 years. I'm so over the moon with this pick. And Gino, as you mentioned, they did not have to give up 50 or 53. I will say myself, I'd love linebacker, and it'd be the perfect finish to the zig over zag offseason for Howie, right? But I do think they're going to want to take an offensive lineman. Like, they're not leaving tomorrow's draft board without getting a tackle.
I think not moving one of those picks, you're already playing with house money. Because we had gone into this saying, if you move 50 or 53, it's probably going to be any combination of corner, offensive line in some fashion. Well, you get the cornerback. Now you can get offensive line. And we could be talking about adding a Ben Sinnott at tight end if he potentially falls. And I know the wide receiver run started to go right towards the end of this first round here. I mean, San Fran picking Ricky Pearsall is like, that's a pretty
the Bills letting Xavier Worthy go to Kansas City by trading with them is insane.
And then Xavier Leggett go to Carolina.
And then the Bills trade down again and give the Panthers Leggett for a 5th instead of a 6th, so they give up the 5th.
Shout out to Howie for just sticking and taking his guy and not getting cute. Yeah. Like, that might be the biggest win, man.
He's done good with that the last 2 years because he did that with Nolan Smith last year. Normally, that's not Howie. Sometimes gets very antsy and has to trade. It almost feels like he has to. It's in his nature. 2 years in a row, he's been smart and has stayed put.
I think he's come a long way as somebody who never drafted a corner and has tried to outsmart himself and has tried to go the pure production, pure traits, pure SEC. Well, this guy, we talked about the outlier. Yeah, he wears a Mac helmet, but he also runs a 4.33. And
Kevin Witherspoon played at Illinois, man.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Sauce played at Cincy. I don't care.
Scout the play. You turn on the tape. Like, he was a top 15 Daniel Jeremiah, man. Like, he might be one of the most well-respected guys evaluating talent. If he has him as a top 15 pick, DJ was a former Eagle scout. I think you and I will say it. A lot of people said it. A lot of people were saying they were going to trade up to get Quinyon Mitchell, a testament to who the player is, and they sat there at 22. 22 didn't move a single thing. Nobody even made Howie beg to go get him. Like, not even played a bluff on him. And he's such a mature guy.
He's such a mature kid, too. I had the chance to talk to him at the Senior Bowl, and just, like, going to be a great locker room player. Kind of a similar energy and vibe almost to Devontae Smith and Jalen Hurts, kind of. Like, a little more reserved, but I think he's going to be a good lead by example kind of player. I think he fits this locker room for sure. So over the moon with that. Gino, I'll say before we get into this A.J. Brown extension, my number one thing on the wish list tomorrow, I'll say Edgerrin Cooper, but I think that's my heart. My head will tell me probably offensive line. I can see them trying to trade down too with one of those picks, trying to get back in the third round.
I don't see them taking a pick at 53 and then waiting until 120. Like,
no, I don't think so either. They're going to want another pick later on tomorrow night.
I could see a little bit of a trade up from like maybe like 53 to like the mid 40s if one of those offensive
maybe like you move up
linemen
from
is sitting
50 and then
there.
you trade down from 53. I think Howie tomorrow is when he gets tradey.
Probably offensive line.
Yeah.
Maybe a pass catcher of sorts if one of the tight ends falls. Like, I would love to see if Ben Sinnott is there.
Sanders or Sinnott, yeah.
Wide receiver is a wild card in that equation.
Who are the best available still? Ladd McConkey's there.
Yep. Ladd is there.
A.D. Mitchell's on the board.
A.D. Mitchell is still available.
Not a lot of guys I love for the Eagles. Malachi Corley, somebody I like.
If we're talking like maybe you get like safety at some point tomorrow, like I don't think it would be if you traded down a little bit. It's wide open at this point. Like, outside of cornerback,
I don't care, man. I got my
playing
corner.
with house
if they
money,
want to take two offensive linemen tomorrow,
like,
whatever, it's fine.
If the draft stopped right now, like, I would be okay with it.
I'm cool.
Yeah, but
I can't believe they got him.
A lot more players on this team.
Oh, yeah. They've got plenty of picks still to go. But the Eagles were also busy at work taking care of their own on the roster. A.J. Brown got an extension about 10 minutes before the draft started. So we're going to get into that coming up next right here on Locked On Eagles. Today's episode of the Locked On Eagles podcast were brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you got to check out LinkedIn Jobs. They have the tools to help you find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just a job board. They help you with hire professionals you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job, but might be open to the perfect role. In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. Hire professionals like a professional through LinkedIn. They know that small businesses are wearing so many hats, and might not have the time or resources to hire. So LinkedIn is constantly finding ways to make the process easier. They even launched a feature that helps you write job descriptions, making the process even easier and quicker. 2.5 million small businesses use LinkedIn for hiring. So post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions do apply. All right, so obviously the story of the night is the Eagles steal Quinyon Mitchell. They don't even need to trade up. They get their CB1 of the future and maybe even of the present. I wouldn't be surprised, if he's automatically better than Darius Slay and everybody else on this secondary. But either way, long-term, that's your guy. But before the draft started, we were live starting at 7 o'clock. We were live for 5 hours today. At 7:50, 10 minutes before the Bears went on the clock, the Eagles gave A.J. Brown a 3-year extension worth $96 million. That includes $84 million guaranteed. The $32 million a year average is the highest for any wide receiver. I love this. I've been saying it over and over again. The biggest key to sustaining success in Philadelphia long-term is keeping the trio of Jalen Hurts, A.J. Brown, and Devontae Smith together. Well, Hurts got his deal last year. Devontae got his deal 2 weeks ago. Now A.J. gets his contract to lower those massive cap hits coming up. What a huge night in that way as well, making sure Brown isn't going anywhere, regardless of you radio stations and media trying to drum up drama. The Eagles never wavered, always supported this guy. He's not going anywhere, so teams quit calling about him.
Yeah, it's a shame that a certain 3-lettered radio station in Philadelphia isn't going to have, is A.J. Brown going to be traded?
Or a podcast platform that has a first name with begins with J.
It rhymes
I'm
with
not gonna-
Schmake up Schmedia. Yeah,
Mhm.
that one. But
Yep.
we're the positivity pod, and we're the one that supported this guy from the get-go. Go look at our reaction a couple
Or if we
years
criticize,
ago.
it's justified. There was no reason to ever, this diva narrative around A.J. Brown never made it, like to treat him like he was Terrell Owens never made any sense.
He's one of the guys that truly is embracing the culture, truly is embracing the leadership element, truly has been one of the right-hand guys.
Every time he
Jalen
talks, he
Hurts.
says the right things. I don't get it, man. I don't know.
Yeah, and like the whole thing with when it was the impromptu interception towards what game was that?
Seattle.
The Seattle game, and Nick Sirianni took some flack, and AJ's like, yeah, Nick took that flack. Like, that was on us. Like, that's accountability, man. You talk about
That's such a
being
diva, man.
accountable. Yeah, that's a diva, man. He's in his driveway doing sit-ups without his shirt on. No, it's nonsense. Not only did they lock up Devontae Smith, you have his cohort in A.J. Brown. You did it ahead of guys like Jamar Chase. Michael Pittman was the only guy in between them that got a bag. So
Amon-Ra, too.
Amon-Ra St. Brown, yes, I forgot those jerseys looked alike in the picture, and I messed it up. But at the same time, next year at this point, what's the wide receiver market going to be? $40 million a year.
I was
when
going to say,
CeeDee
this
Lamb
deal
gets paid?
it looks expensive
Like, you pushed
now.
Dallas's foot to the fire on the CeeDee Lamb deal after. I can't imagine CeeDee sitting there saying, hey, Philly can pay both these guys, and they paid their quarterback.
You have to,
I'm
Gino,
not
and that's
getting
the thing. Teams, everybody's investing now in multiple star pass catchers. Like, it's not a luxury anymore. It's almost a necessity in the NFL. But so many teams only do that for a short span, right? Like the Cowboys with CeeDee Lamb and Amari Cooper. That was so short-lived. Brandon Ayuk is on the trade block now, despite having Deebo Samuel there. And, the Cincinnati Bengals are probably not going to keep Jamar Chase and T. Higgins together. I love that the Eagles recognize that we shouldn't let this duo ever go anywhere.
No.
Even if we have to pay them a combined total of $57 million a year annually, guess what? It's worth it. We don't want to go back to 2020 when it's Travis Fulgham and Jalen Reagor.
No, Howie's not going to allow that to happen again. And the Eagles aren't the only team investing this heavily in offense. I mean, you mentioned it with Chicago. I mean, they bring in Keenan Allen, and they have DJ Moore, and
Now
what
Roman
do? They
Dunze.
draft a top 3 wide receiver in the class. And look at teams like Seattle that you're competing against. They did that with JSN last year. It's the Cold War on offense. It is a arms
Literally.
race. And the Eagles have the biggest nuclear warhead in the arsenal right now.
It's nice to not be jealous of teams like Chicago because I'm like, that's nice, but Philly's got a better one.
And it kind of just kills like the narrative that you can't keep a team together post quarterback. Like Howie Roseman is disproving that in the best
Well, when you
way
invest
possible.
in prime players, the kicking the can down the road strategy helps even more, Gino. Like, this isn't the Alshon contract. A.J. Brown's cap hits were about to be huge. This year it was you could stomach it. After that, it was going to be like over $20 million and then over $40 million. He's only 25, turning 26 soon. You can still backload that contract. He's one of the best receivers in football. So it made so much sense to extend that deal.
And it makes so much sense that Howie Roseman would do that 10 minutes before the freaking draft.
It's
such a Howie. He's like, hey, slip this out to the media, Adam Schefter and Ian Rappaport. But no, hats off to Howie to staying ahead of the curve, and hats off to him identifying that this offense is truly what is making this thing click. But at the same time, Lou, as much as he invested in offense, he's turned right around with the defense and made some high-quality investments, man, like Bryce Huff. You go out there and do that. Yeah, you trade away Hassan Reddick, but he brought in somebody else that could do the job too. And what else do you do on the back end? You bring in CGJ. Devin White hopefully can bring you a little bit something better than what you had last year. And what do you do in the first round? You draft Quinyon Mitchell. And there's plenty of other guys you can add in the next 48 hours that can even improve this room to be even better. So they're on the ball, man. Like, they're ahead of the curve. This is a good spot to be. It doesn't feel like 2020 with Jalen Reagor where you're trying to find your footing. This team knows where they are. They know that they're going to compete, and they know that there's multiple ways to skin a cat. Like, we can invest 9 contracts in our offense and then find a way on defense to go figure it out. Like, that's Howie Roseman's thing. He's never just going to sit there and just hope it gets better. He's going to find a way.
It's the perfect balance of the way he has this roster set up. I shouldn't say a balance, but it makes sense when you look at how much he's invested in top tier contracts on offense. Like he has 3 of the top 10 highest paid offensive linemen. He has 2 of the top 5 highest paid receivers now, 1 of the highest paid tight ends and quarterbacks and running backs. So much money invested in offense that on defense, you got to invest those top picks right now because that's how you're going to get production out of that unit because you really just can't afford to spend a ton of money on that side with the offense being the way it's structured right now. So you need guys like Quinyon Mitchell on this defense.
Bingo. And they got him, man. And you didn't shell out more than you had to. And even with the contracts, like, yeah, you're shelling out a lot now, but we know how quickly this thing changes. Like how quickly was Landon Dickerson's extension a bargain, and Jalen Hurts, you're looking at that contract extension and saying, how quickly is that going to be a $10 million bargain? And once again, they're ahead of the curve, man. They're ahead of the curve. Tonight kind of solidified that within the last 3 hours. And
with everything.
Yeah. Are you being a little bit reactive at cornerback? To be honest, I would say no, because some teams could sit there and say, yeah, we got Slay and we got Bradbury and we invested.
Rodgers is reinstated. Ringo showed some
we could
flashes.
just sit there, but no, they want to push the pace. They're never going to sit on their laurels. If there's an ability to upgrade anywhere, tonight is so evident, dude. So evident.
Quinyon Mitchell is a Philadelphia Eagle. A.J. Brown's not going anywhere. What an absolute banger of a first night for the 2024 NFL Draft. We've got more coverage for you tomorrow. The Eagles on the clock at currently 50 and 53. Subscribe to the Locked On Eagles podcast, your team every day right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Once again, want to thank all of our viewers and listeners for tuning in throughout the offseason, the draft process, and especially today, our live show. Over 500 people tuned in all across the globe, people from Australia, New Zealand, Scotland. Shout out to you guys. You made it a very memorable night.
This is Christmas. This is what it's all about, man. And I'm glad that we got to do it together once again, 6 years in a row. It always feels like it feels surreal when it's done, but we still got 2 more days of it. But the process is what it's all about. Like that journey was very enjoyable, and tonight
makes it worth it when you get the payoff too, right?
Yeah, it was the most
once you stick
fun.
the landing, it was great.
In that chat, man, like to have the interaction. Santa is real. Like that'll be.
Yeah, Gino had to bounce for people that weren't in there. Gino had to bounce a couple people for tipping picks, which kind of was unfortunate, but he had to play the bouncer. I respect it.
Sometimes you got to be the bad cop, but hey, good things happen to some good people, and that happened tonight, man. That was fun. Get to do it all again tomorrow.
Yes, sir. For Gino Camilleri, I'm Lou DiBiase signing off. Quinyon Mitchell, Philadelphia Eagle. Go enjoy those highlights for sure. As always, thanks so much for downloading, watching, and listening, and let's go Birds.
Fly, Eagles, fly.